Story 1. The Jogger in the Woods. I wouldn't call myself an athlete by any means, but I've always enjoyed running late in the evenings after work. It helps me clear my head and makes me feel like I am doing something productive instead of just collapsing on the couch. My buddy Marcus and I would usually run together around our neighborhood in Huntsville, Alabama. The streets there are lined with tall pine trees, and most of the main road is lit with old street lamps. It always felt safe. At least it used to. There's this one route we like to take to make things more challenging. It cuts from the neighborhood into a wooded trail behind an old church and eventually loops back toward the highway. From there, you can rejoin the main road and run back home. It added a couple more miles to the workout, and honestly, the trail itself was the best part during the day. It looks peaceful with deer crossing sometimes and the smell of pine everywhere, but at night it's a different story. The trees press in from all sides, and the lights from the houses fade until it's just you, the dirt path, and the dark. One night about 2 months ago, Marcus and I decided to push ourselves. We left my house around 9:30 p.m. and headed toward the trail. The first mile or so was fine. We were joking about dumb stuff from high school. Laughing between heavy breaths, it felt normal. But halfway down that wooded trail, I started noticing something strange. Another set of footsteps behind us. They weren't too far off either, just close enough that I thought maybe someone had decided to use the trail after us. I didn't want to seem paranoid, so I ignored it for a while. But here's the thing, the steps mirrored ours. If we sped up, they sped up. If we slowed down, they slowed down, perfectly matched. I tried glancing back a few times, but the path was too dark to make out much. The weak glow of Marcus' headlamp only showed empty trees, and the curve of the trail, my chest felt tight, and it wasn't from the running. By the time we finally made it out of the trail and onto the road, we both turned at the same time, like we'd agreed on it without speaking. But there was nothing, no one behind us, just the trail disappearing into the trees. I laughed nervously. Marcus gave me that look, like he was trying to convince himself it was all in my head, and we pushed on. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew we weren't alone out there. We followed the road until it turned into a dirt path, leading out towards some farmland. It was darker here with no streetlights, just a pale sliver of moonlight above us. The trees on both sides leaned in like a tunnel. My breath made white clouds in the air as we jogged further down the dirt path. That is when I saw it movement just at the edge of the tree line, a shadow darting out of sight so fast I wasn't even sure I saw it. At first I froze mid-step. Marcus almost ran straight into me when I told him what I'd seen. He rolled his eyes and said I was just tired or paranoid, but my stomach was already turning cold because deep down, I knew what I saw wasn't in my head, it was real. We kept going anyway. Neither of us wanted to admit how uneasy we felt. The night was quiet, except for our footsteps and the occasional rustle of wind in the branches. But every few seconds, I swore I could hear something else just barely behind us. Half a mile down that dirt road, Marcus suddenly stopped. He was staring off into the trees on our left. I followed his gaze and my throat went dry. Standing between two trees was a figure completely still, almost blending into the darkness. It wore a black hoodie, the hood pulled up so low I couldn't see a face. The pants were ripped filthy like they'd been dragged through the mud. The way it stood motionless made my whole body scream with dread. I whispered to Marcus, "Did it just move closer?" He didn't answer at first, but when he finally nodded, I felt my knees go weak. The thing hadn't made a sound, but somehow it had closed half the distance between us without us noticing. Marcus finally found his voice and shouted, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" But his words just hung in the air like dead weight. The figure didn't respond at first. Then from the dark came this laugh. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was cracked, broken, like someone choking and cackling. At the same time, the sound crawled down my spine. It made me want to run right then and there. The figure turned slowly to face us, and I'll never forget that face, pale skin stretched tight over bone-wide eyes. Staring with this hateful glare, its mouth twisted in a grin. Too wide, too forced, I could feel bile rising in my throat. Then, without warning, it stopped laughing. The grin fell away and it just stared, eyes locked on us like a predator, sizing up prey. Neither Marcus nor I moved for a few seconds. I swear it felt like time stopped. The air was so heavy around us, my ears were ringing. Finally, Marcus whispered, "We need to go now." And on some unspoken cue, we both bolted. We ran harder than we ever had before. The cold air burning our lungs, the crunch of dirt under our shoes deafening behind us. The laugh started again, only louder, carried through the trees, echoing in the night. I didn't dare look back. I just focused on moving forward, on not slowing down every time I thought maybe we'd lost it. The laugh would come again a little closer. By the time we burst out of the dirt road and back onto the main street, we were drenched in sweat and shaking, but we didn't stop. We sprinted the last 2 miles straight back to my house. When we finally got inside, I slammed every door, locked every window, and dropped to the floor heaving. Marcus leaned against the wall, pale and wide-eyed. Neither of us said a word for a long time. That night changed everything for me. I don't run that trail anymore. I don't even walk near that church after dark. Sometimes I still hear that laugh in my head when I try to fall asleep. I don't know if it was some sick person trying to scare us, or something else, something not human. But I do know one thing, whatever it was. It wanted us to know we were being hunted. And it wanted us terrified. If you're ever jogging at night and you hear footsteps behind you, trust your gut and get out of there, because sometimes the thing following you doesn't want to pass you, it wants you. Story 2, The Man in the Woods with the Cleaver. Back when I was in high school in Vermont, I had a side job that sounded easy enough. A woman named Mrs. Carter, who lived about 3 miles from my place, asked if I could jog her husky mix named Shadow a few evenings a week. Shadow was a huge bundle of energy she couldn't handle on her own, so she paid me $15 a run for me. It was a great excuse to get in some training and earn cash at the same time. The road near her house curved along dense forest on one side and an open field on the other. At sunset, it looked beautiful, orange light spilling across the treetops, but once the sun dipped below the horizon, that entire stretch turned into something else. The shadows in the trees thickened and every sound carried differently, like the woods themselves were whispering. One chilly October evening, I decided to take Shadow on a longer jog. It was just past 6:30 p.m. When we started, the sun had nearly vanished, and the only light came from the fading purple sky. The crunch of my sneakers on the road and Shadow's panting filled the silence. It was calming in a way, but also lonely. More than once I caught myself glancing into the woods beside us, half expecting to see a deer or maybe even a black bear. But the trees stood silent and still. About 2 miles in, Shadow stopped dead. Her ears pricked forward, her body stiff. Her growl was low, guttural, a warning sound that I had never heard from her before. My breath froze in my chest as I followed her gaze. At first all I saw were dark tree trunks and shifting branches. But then I noticed him, a man partly hidden behind one of the trees. He was standing unnaturally still, just his head visible peeking out from the bark. He wore a thick coat, despite the mild weather, and a wool cap pulled low over his face, gloves covered. His hands, his eyes though, that's what made my stomach drop wide, unblinking and locked right on me. I gave a nervous nod and tugged at Shadow's leash, trying to keep jogging like it was no big deal, but every instinct screamed at me to run away as fast as I could. Shadow refused to move, her paws planted firmly on the road. She gave a sharp whimper, tugging back toward Mrs. Carter's house. I muttered, "Come on, girl." But when I looked up again, my throat went dry. The man wasn't behind the tree anymore. He was standing at the tree line, closer to us than before. Not walking, not running, just suddenly there, like the shadows had spat him out. His head tilted slightly, studying me the way a butcher might study an animal before slaughter. I forced myself to jog again. Shadow reluctantly followed, but I could feel his eyes burning holes in my back every step. For a moment I thought maybe it was over. Maybe he'd just watch us leave and vanish back into the woods. But then I heard it, the unmistakable crunch of leaves behind us, steady, deliberate. I turned my head and almost screamed. He was walking after us, but his movements were wrong, jerky, too fast, then too slow, like a puppet on strings. And then I saw it glinting in his right hand. The shape caught the last scrap of sunlight, a butcher cleaver, long, heavy, and already stained. Panic exploded in my chest, adrenaline like fire in my veins. I yanked Shadow's leash and sprinted, my feet slamming the pavement so hard my legs screamed. Shadow ran alongside me, barking frantically. I didn't dare look back, but I could hear him behind us, boots slamming the road, erratic scraping noises like metal brushing stone. The most terrifying part, though, was the silence between those sounds. No panting, no gasps, no breath. It was like he was chasing us without lungs. I cut hard into a side road, praying he wouldn't follow, but the sound of his boots echoed closer, his pace quickening. Shadow was practically dragging me forward now, barking non-stop in pure panic. I risked a glance over my shoulder and almost stumbled. He was sprinting now, his arms flailing wildly, his face twisted in rage, mouth open. But no sound came out, except that horrible scrape of his boots against the pavement. The cleaver swung loosely at his side, catching the dim light each time like a signal of death flashing at me over and over. I veered off the road into a cluster of backyards, zigzagging between sheds, fences, anything to throw him off. Shadow nearly yanked my arm out of its socket as she pulled me faster. I ducked behind a tall wooden fence, crouching low against the boards, heart hammering in my throat. For a moment all was silent. Then slowly I turned my head, peeking through a crack, and my blood went cold. At the top of the hill, maybe 30 yards away, he stood silhouetted against the darkening sky. The cleaver dangling from his hand, his chest rose and fell like he'd just stopped running. But his head was tilted again, staring down at the exact spot where I hid. We locked eyes, his expression unreadable. No more rage, no more chase, just a blank, hollow gaze like he'd lost interest. Or maybe like he was saving me for later. I don't know how long I stayed frozen behind that fence. But eventually headlights from a car cut across the hill, breaking the darkness in an instant. He turned without hesitation and walked back into the woods, swallowed by the black. I waited until my legs stopped shaking before running the long way back to Mrs. Carter's house. When she asked how Shadow had done, I forced a smile and said, "Fine." I never told her what happened. I never told my parents either. I just knew if I did, they'd never let me run again. But sometimes when I'm out jogging, even now years later, if the woods go quiet and the wind dies, I swear I can hear the faint scrape of boots against the pavement, and I know he is still out there somewhere waiting. Story 3. The SUV that never left. I grew up in a small suburban neighborhood in Ohio, surrounded by endless farmland and winding back roads. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other. Its name, and nothing bad was supposed to happen. But even when I was a kid, I always had this strange sense that something was watching me out there waiting. The first time I remember it happening, I was 9 years old. My younger sister and I were walking our dog near the end of our street when a large white SUV pulled up and slowed to a crawl. The driver, a man with curly blonde hair, leaned out the window and waved at us, telling us to come closer. My sister started to step forward, but something in me screamed, "No." I yanked her arm and we bolted back home. When I told my mum, she brushed it off, saying he probably just needed directions. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. A year later, on Halloween, a black sedan started following groups of trick-or-treaters through our neighborhood. No plates on the car, just slowly creeping along the curb. Parents eventually noticed. And when one dad walked up to confront the driver, the car lurched forward, trying to run him down before speeding away. I didn't see it myself, but I heard the panic, the way the adults whispered about it for weeks afterward, like they all knew something was wrong, but didn't want to admit it out loud. 4 years passed. Nothing unusual happened until the summer I was 15. A neighbor asked me to watch their golden retriever while they were on vacation. Their house sat off the main road with woods stretching behind it. Most nights I'd cut through those woods to save time. But one night I came out of the house and saw a black sedan idling at the edge of the driveway. No one inside visible. No headlights, just sitting there in the dark. I froze, debating whether to walk back past it in the open road. My gut screamed not to, so I sprinted through the woods instead, branches slapping my arms the whole way. When I finally looked back from my own backyard, the sedan was gone. That night burned into my brain because I started connecting the dots. White SUV, black sedan, different years. But always men. Always cars lingering too long. Always circling kids in our neighborhood. Still, I told myself, maybe it was coincidence. Maybe I was being paranoid, but then came quarantine and that excuse fell apart. When my school's track season got cancelled, I started jogging alone every evening to keep up my stamina. The roads around my neighborhood were quiet during lockdown, almost too quiet. The first time I noticed it. The white SUV appeared again, creeping along the opposite side of the road, going no faster. Then I was jogging. I turned down a side street with a cul-de-sac it didn't follow. I convinced myself it was nothing. But the next day, it happened again. This time, the SUV pulled out of a driveway right after I passed, like it had been waiting. I tried to shake it off, but my skin crawled every second it tailed me. This went on for 10 days every evening, no matter what time I went out. The SUV showed up sometimes behind me, sometimes ahead of me, like it already knew my route. I tried switching times, running an hour later one night. It didn't appear, and I almost relaxed. But the next day when I rounded the corner, there it was again, as if to remind me I wasn't in control. On the 11th day it escalated. I turned onto that same side street. I always used to escape, only this time. There was a black sedan parked at the end, headlights off inside the faint outline of someone crouched low in the passenger seat, barely visible. My heart dropped. I spun around, but the white SUV was already rolling up behind me, slow, deliberate, blocking my way out. I was trapped. Panic took over. I sprinted full speed toward the SUV, hoping to dart past it before anything could happen. When I got within a few feet, the driver's door flew open. A tall man jumped out, reaching for me, his curly blonde hair spilling into the streetlight, the same man from years ago, the one who called me over as a kid. His voice was hoarse as he shouted, "Wait, come here, I just want to talk." I didn't hesitate. I shoved past him, flipping him off as I sprinted into the night, adrenaline pumping harder than in any race I'd ever run. I didn't stop until I collapsed into my driveway, lungs burning, vision blurry. I burst into the house and finally told my mom everything. She called the police, but without plates, without solid evidence, there was nothing they could do. The officer's voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "Probably just a coincidence," he said. But his eyes told a different story. They knew something was off too. It has been months since that night, but I can't shake it. The image of that blonde man stepping out of the SUV still plays in my head over and over when I go jogging. Now, I never take the same route twice. I never go at the same time. And yet sometimes, when I am out there, I see headlights creeping in my peripheral vision, the sound of slow tires crunching gravel behind me, and I know it's not over. Because these men have been circling my neighborhood for nearly a decade, and if they were patient enough to wait all those years, I cannot help but wonder who they'll finally catch.